We'll call it to order here. All right, Wednesday, March 22nd, 2023, Board of Regents meeting is called to order. Let's start with minutes. Call for a motion to approve our February 15th, 2023 meeting.
So move to approve the minutes.
I hear a motion to approve. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All right, moved and seconded. I'm going to give Regent Benson the credit for the second thing. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. It looks like we're down 2 regents today. We're actually only down 1. Regent Harrison Lee is with us online there. So if you guys can help me, if she's raising her hand or needing to say something, if I'm not seeing it, because it's out of my periphery here, just make sure I can call on her. All right. Do we have any introductions today? Yes, President Mason.
It's my pleasure to welcome to our meeting our incoming Faculty Senate President. Here early to learn the ropes and see it, Dr. Elodie Jones. Elodie.
Stand up. There we go. All right. Thank you. Anybody else have an introduction they'd like to make? All right, let's keep moving. Report from the chair. That's me. Last month, the board had dinner with the community and technical college leaders. I just gotta tell you, I thought it was really robust. I've been to 4. Well, I guess we missed 1 or 2, maybe I've only been to 2.
Yeah.
Of those, so it was better than the other one. But it's the first time.
Particularly like the chair's remarks.
Yes, I did. Yeah, he's a sharp dude. Anyway, it had been a couple of years since we'd been able to be together because of the pandemic, and even with some weather, I thought we had great attendance. What we did is took a lot of the questions we were talking about in our retreat and just brought it up for that and did table discussions and then report outs. We talked about who do we want to be? Again, thinking as a system here, what are the barriers and challenges? And in 5 years, where do you want to be? I thought I'd read those out for everybody just so you can hear what that conversation was. Sound pretty similar to our retreat. But some good add-ons too. And there's really good unity, I think, across the tables too. I think we're all seeing the problems similarly and excited about being a state where we're leaning into shaping the future. All right, so who do we want to be? We want to be adaptable. We want to be student-centric. We want to be blended and accessible to learners to meet their needs. We want to be working towards improving student success, having aspirational shared goals and multiple student exit ramps, and having a system that is adaptable and flexible. Then when we talk about what are the barriers and challenges that we're facing, unpredictability of everything, level of rigidity, demonstrating the value of higher education to legislators, overcoming the process and cumbersome issues, lack of respect and understanding for each other, population change, outmigration, fighting over scraps, doing things the same way they have always been done, systems and processes that can be barriers. And then 5 years, where do we want to be? We want to be helping more students. We want to be evolving to meet the needs of business and industry. We want to not be fighting among ourselves over funding. We want to be working together as a system, including program transfer. We want to be moving beyond lip service into actually having integrated K-Board institution plans. We want to be driving funding toward outputs and having a seamless system across all sectors. So hopefully the folks that were in that conversation feel like their comments were all represented there, but that was great. Did you guys enjoy it? Am I gonna get any head nods from my fellow regents? Yeah.
It's great.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. Then at the end of February, President Flanders and I attended the WSU Tech 10-year Excel and CTE celebration in the hangar. It was great. What a wonderful program. Obviously, a lot of success. I got to interview 3 students. It's just amazing. One graduating high school with an associate's, another one coming out with the welding certificate, and both welding and coming back and now teaching. Just some really impressive students out there. It's good to be reminded of why we do what we do and the opportunities that are out there for us. And then excited WSU Tech announced a Shocker Institute in partnership with WSU and the Goddard School District, where they're going to be taking students to help them get their associate's degree by the time they graduate. So early college academy. Thank you very much. And then third, we have received the feedback on the RPK study from the campuses, which we're grateful for, and it's extensive. And so we are still in the place of processing that feedback. So that's the chair's report. Let me pass that on over to President Blake Flanders for the President and CEO report.
Thank you, Chair Rolfe. The Promise Act scholarships, Promise Act website is open, and we've got about 2,500 applications to the Promise Act already. So we're excited about that. Two-year college is doing a great job there. We had
That opened at the same time it always is?
what?
Did you open it at the same? time it
Actually,
always?
earlier, on budget, and earlier than expected. So yeah, and I will tell you, the team works really hard. That it's a complex scholarship with some complex golden handcuffs, and so it takes a lot of management to do that. But our two-year colleges are doing a great job there as well. And then we're pleased that the board was again appropriated $20,000 for the Governor's Scholarship Program for FY 2023. So thank you to the governor and legislature. And in the past, we've made these awards to community and technical colleges with the highest student success rating, and we propose to do that this year. And I want to announce those 3 community colleges and 1 technical college, and they'll be given $5,000 to award 5 students $1,000 each. So we appreciate all their efforts there. The 3 community colleges with the highest student success index rating that will receive these awards is Colby Community College. Oh, it says wait for applause. Colby Community College. Dodge City Community College. And Pratt Community College. And the technical college is WSU Tech. So it's great to be able to award those dollars to our students. I also want to say thank you to Manhattan Area Technical College for piloting an early college algebra program without cost to students. I think it's going to be a great opportunity for students to access our system and find success earlier in high school and be ready and positioned as they pursue their post-secondary opportunities. So with that, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Blake? All right, let's move on to the report from the Council of Faculty Senate Presidents. Dr. Nate Brunsell, are you here? There you are.
Hey, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here again, at least virtually. We'd like to start off with, if you all recall, when we had our breakfast at the beginning of the academic year, you all put forward a question to us asking how the faculty senate presidents and faculty could potentially interact and work more efficiently with the board. And so we've been thinking about that quite a bit. And at the time, we and especially myself, and I think most of the faculty senate presidents were really new at the position. And so we didn't have a lot of ideas or understanding of what the engagement was or how these roles worked at this time. And so now that we've been doing this for a little while, we have some ideas on ways that we could potentially improve communication between the institutions, particularly the faculty at the institutions and the board. And so one thing we thought might be useful would be, we know that there's the 3-person regent committees that represent each of the institutions. And we think that it might be useful if those members could come out to the institutions maybe once or twice a year to meet with the governance, the faculty, staff, student governance, and see the institutions and just kind of have maybe a day of communications and seeing the interactions and hearing the voices of these people beyond just being kind of filtered through my role in these brief updates. I think that would go a long ways to kind of just improving communication broadly and demystifying some of the ideas of local faculty at the institutions when it comes to the interactions with the board and what the board is doing and the motivations of the board and seeing that. So we thought that might be a useful thing. Another thing we thought might be useful is several of us attend several of the board meetings throughout the day, the other committee meetings that the board has throughout the day. And we thought it might be useful to maybe more formalize or come up with more formal roles for a faculty senate president member on these boards. Particularly, I'm thinking BAS and committees maybe as an ex officio where we could engage more, ask questions, and participate more rather than just attending as guests. We think that could go a long way to just kind of being able to ask questions and things like that beyond just kind of, again, kind of an update from the, my role of the president of the faculty senate presidents to the extent that we can. And so we just think that things like that could go a long way. And, being able to increase his participation. I know, many of you, several of you have gone to different institutions on your own and talked and engaged with each of these institutions. But we think that doing it in a slightly more formal way might improve the communications and allow us to have, better two-way communication. So we thought that would be a good way just to kind of start off with these. On some other issues, we still have a few concerns about the adoptions of timelines and kind of the adoption of versus implementation of timelines. And particularly the two that come to mind that we discussed were we know that there's a timeline being developed for a workload policy now that's being sent to the institutions, which I believe the deadline is in the summer. And so, just kind of having a little bit more time for the institutions and particularly the faculty at the institutions to engage with that process and offer feedback through the institutional senates that they represent. And then also the other one that's kind of on the top of our minds right now is the filing for exceptions related to the gen ed frameworks at each of our institutions. We know that timeline is coming up in the summer, but again, many of our institutions, that information is just kind of rolling out to the faculty who are in charge of these exceptions over the last few weeks. And with several faculty, most faculty not being on campus during the summer, that really gives about a month or so for those exceptions to be made. And so having some clear guidelines and what the framework and the paperwork and what the process is for those approvals being communicated, particularly to the faculty, would be very helpful. We would really appreciate that. And then on the last thing I'll say, thank you for the update on the RPK, because we know that was, obviously I've mentioned this almost every month now, but we are looking forward to what your recommendations are for that. And I was wondering if you might be willing to share some of that feedback that you've received from all of the faculty at the institutions with the faculty senate presidents and the institutions, just so that we can see maybe a little bit better what that recommendations or what that feedback looks like, and if you'd be willing to share that with us, or more of a timeline on if that will be on the agenda for the next board meeting. We'd also appreciate that information. With that, I will conclude my update.
All right. Dr. Flanders, you have any issue sharing the feedback? Yeah, so we'll send that out to you guys. I'd ask Dr. Brensel if you'd send in writing to me the couple ideas that you shared about more action on campus and the more formal roles ex officio, just so I wrote those notes down, and then I also heard what you're talking about, the adoption timeline, particularly around workforce and exemptions on gen ed as two examples on that. So just reflecting that I heard that. And then RPK, I don't know, do we have yet a timeline to roll out? I see Dr. Lane nodding her head.
We have a timeline for the provost to bring recommendations on the program review back to BASC next month, and dependent on the engagement there and input from BASC committee, then it may come to the board in May, but no later than June for sure, the recommendations on the new process. in terms of workload, Dr. Brunzel, I think from Bass perspective, we're just, that focus is program review. The workload is going to be an expectation, I think, that we're going to recommend to the board, but that's yet to be done, that each institution have a workload policy. So and I heard in your comments that you thought there was a policy circling around. I'm not sure that that is, at least according to how Basque has talked about it.
Thank you for the clarification.
Any questions for Dr. Brunzel? Additions? All right, Nate, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate it. All right, let's move over to President Sadie Williams reporting for the Student Advisory Committee. President Williams.
Right. Thank you so much, Chair Rolfe and President Flanders and the rest of the board. And so first and foremost, I have a gift for all of you in the form of a little proposal. Can I approach the bench? I don't know.
Yes, Your Honor.
I can't, there's a gift policy.
Yeah, sorry if this is over $15, we can't receive this gift. Did you go to Kinko's or?
I use the Student Senate printer, so
Okay.
it's $50 hard at work. No, but so that is the dual credit proposal, and I'll go over that, I think, last, but I have a couple updates that I want to share with you all first. First, I wanted to address that there are going to be, over the next 2 meetings, quite a bit of turnover among the student body presidents. There are some universities that already have their individuals who will be serving over the next academic year elected. So they're here today. And then the rest, I think the next half will be here in April, and then everyone will be here by May whenever the fees are presented to fiscal affairs and audit. So I wanted to put that on all of y'all's radar. And in addition, we will be here to present the fees in fiscal affairs and audit, which we're really looking forward to having the opportunity to share with you what our processes look like to make sure that the student voice is represented, especially at the campus fee level. And then also looking forward to the next meeting. We are going to, at the Students Advisory Council level, look into what it looks like to be a student at our universities in terms of the rights and protections that we have in the classroom. And so we'll be kind of bringing that conversation and that research to you all then in a month from now. So I wanted to give you that look at what kind of that last more robust report will look like for you all from this group of the SAC. And so moving forward into that dual credit and concurrent enrollment proposal. First, just wanted to disclaim, and I'm not going to take like 30 minutes, but there's a lot of content in there. And also to reaffirm that I'm coming to you all as a student and as a voice for students. And so I am, although well-researched in this area and have learned a lot over the past couple of months, I'm not an expert. And so all this is coming from our experiences and from the experiences of other students across the state, mixed with kind of the status quo. But I wanted to state that first and foremost. And so within this proposal that you were all handed out, and I have 6 more copies for you all as well, just because I wanted to be considerate, involve you all. The first page beyond the cover page is kind of just the challenges with the status quo. So that's a lot of what we talked about in our initial presentation with the little, what was right, wrong, confused, and all that stuff in the state of Kansas. So a lot of that is that connection between what we were saying as just like observers and the people who have been in this system and observed the system as students, and connecting it to more so what the current policies are in a more tangible way. So it's kind of painting that from abstract thoughts into here's what it looks like boots on the ground right now in Kansas and where students are having trouble with it. The opportunities for change is the next page, and it tags line by line and bullet point by bullet point to the next. So they're next to each other. And if you unstapled them and kind of laid them right across, you can draw a line directly to what potential solutions are that we see as students, stemming from conversations with some of y'all, and then also with our own universities, as to what could be reasonably done to help address these gaps too. And so that's kind of that outline. And then the next pages, it looks like I did more work than I did. The next pages are your bylaws and your policies. Just copy and pasted them over. It's a really robust process there. But basically, we went through and just highlighted, put in red some potential additions that we saw could be helpful for students. And then most of what you'll see is yellow highlights, and that's just notes, kind of as like I went through them of like, here's how this is impacting students, and here's something that you could add or take away that would help further protect students, or give them opportunities for students. So that's kind of the breakdown of this document so that way you're be able to better peruse it. But what I wanted to spend most of that section talking about is the need, like why this conversation is so important to us as students, why we see it necessary to advocate to you all, even though it doesn't necessarily align exactly with our roles as student body presidents. And so really what it comes down to, and as you all have noted in the bylaws regarding dual credit, is like affordability and access is a huge part of dual credit. It's giving that opportunity to students. But there's so much more at stake here, and there's such a higher opportunity to serve our students. It can help keep high achieving students in the state if they already are if they have the opportunity to have more dual credit courses and graduate with 12 credit hours or 16 or 30, then the incentive for them to stay in the state of Kansas at one of our Regent institutions is expounded, because if they go out of state, there's no guarantee that those credits transfer. And the farther away they go, the less that is maintained. And so it can help in that way, which I think isn't talked about enough. And I know that was a huge factor for me, was I had already paid for college classes, and I was like, well, I don't want to just throw those away because I worked hard and I got good grades, but they would have just been extracurriculars in most other places. Noting I was always going to be a Jayhawk, but just for an example. In addition to that, if students are able to graduate with more credits in college, then there's a greater opportunity for them to explore more multidisciplinary tracks in their undergraduate careers. If they come to school with most of their general education requirements completed, it opens up the door for them to have a double major, a triple major, or a major and 3 minors, and still graduate in 4 or 5 years, as opposed to right now with having about 30 credit hours worth of general education courses necessary. That's a whole year of their academics that are tied up in these mandated classes. So if they can have the opportunity to complete them earlier, then they can come to college and really focus on just doing the things that they're passionate about, and that'll propel them into their futures because they already have that strong foundation. And then also a key part of this that I wanted to note as well is affirming the expertise and the ability of both post-secondary institution and their faculty, as well as the high school educators in their roles. And so something that is a primary barrier that is really the only thing that I'm going to pull out substantively here is that right now, dual credit and concurrent courses are really only available kind of sparsely, if that makes sense. It's not consistent across the state. And a lot of that has to do with concurrent classes here can only be taught by teachers who either have their graduate degree in the course area or have completed equivalent amount of graduate courses. And so someone who has a master's education can't just teach a college level English course, for instance. And that creates a lot of barriers whenever you have high schools and districts who aren't able to attract those more highly qualified individuals because of funding or lack of geographic proximity, all those other barriers. But you still have people who are experts in their field, who are highly qualified and have the ability to teach those courses. And so a lot of what we talked about was enabling our universities and our post-secondary institutions to have a really strong and robust partnership that's outlined in y'all's policies, but isn't really enforced in the way that it really could be. And really making sure that as a system, we're not talking about, K-12 and post-secondary is separate, but really streamlining that process and recognizing that education is important and that the pathway should be more of a streamlined trek, as opposed to you go here and then you go here and then you go here. We can all work together to reasonably support students in this state. And what it looks like is just acknowledging that educators are able to perform this high level and really streamlining that partnership. And so it could be really good. And also what we were talking about today, that I think is the last piece that I'll kind of bring up, is that bolstering dual credit really does, in our opinion, as the SAC and as students, align with y'all's current missions, especially in the streamlining of the general education and core curriculum requirements across the state of Kansas and easing its transferability between institutions. Those general education courses is kind of the focus of providing those throughout more high schools in Kansas. That's kind of the focus of this. So not really saying that, high schoolers should have the opportunity to take differential equations, their senior year, but more so Calc 1 and speech and all those types of courses. That's the focus here. And I think that it really aligns with what y'all are trying to do and making education accessible, making the ease of transferring within the Kansas system a priority, and just making what it means to be a student in Kansas overall stronger. And so that's kind of the goal of this little proposal. It's nothing too robust, but it is just a little insight into our perspectives and tying into what that means policy-wise. So yeah. That's all I have.
Thank you, President Williams. What questions do you have for Sadie? Comments? You pack a lot in a short amount of time. It's really impressive.
The key is to talk fast and drink a lot of coffee.
It's like having you on 1.5 on the playback speed, right?
Yeah,
But
2 times so.
hey, I just got to say the second time we've asked for feedback, and you all have done just a wonderful job of not only getting it, thinking about it, and then organizing in a way that we can digest it. So I just want to say thank you to you and all your colleagues who've worked so hard on this. We will definitely take this and read it, and this can be helpful as we move forward. So again, not that I need to compare it to other years, but you guys have been as impressive a group of student leaders and as responsive and as I've ever seen. So thank you guys very much for all you're doing. All right. Okay. Thank you, President Williams. All right. Regent Lane, Academic Affairs.
Very much. And Chair Rolfe, I'll make sure that our Committee on Concurrent receives the students' report. Well done. This morning in Basque, it was a very full meeting. It was my privilege to chair the meeting in place of Regent Kiblinger, who could not be here with us today. We received a report on the state authorization reciprocity agreement from Jennifer Armour. This is a national agreement partnership with the Midwest Higher Ed Compact that allows us to participate in distance education or online courses across the state line. Jennifer shared a lot of numbers with us about our participation. And I asked the question about whether or not we are maximizing this strategy and trying to attract students into the state. So that's definitely something that we might want to have future conversations about. Tara Labar provided an update on the open education resources. As always, it was high energy, exciting report to hear about our progress on OER. Remind the board that there is an OER showcase tomorrow from 8:30 to 3 o'clock on the first floor rotunda area. So we have a chance to meet with the faculty who are really driving this forward. Critically important to our affordability initiative, and we can't be we need to be very appreciative of all the efforts that are underway. Kansas is being recognized as a true leader in the OER space, and we should be very proud of that. We also had an update from Matt Keith and Judd McCormick on our dashboard. You might recall just last month, we approved the additional foundational metrics. The team here has taken those metrics and are working on a visualization of those metrics that I think the board will be very pleased about. It includes a coding system that will allow us to clearly identify Pillar 1 foundational metrics. It includes affiliating color schemes so that like indicators are in a similar color tone, for example, Pell eligible students and needs-based aid affiliated. And so we had an opportunity to share some feedback and look forward to that work continuing. The timeline is to have the foundational metrics up fully loaded on that dashboard on or before June 1st. And so they're driving towards that in a very robust way. We also received a report from Dr. Joan Brewer, who is the Dean of Emporia's Teacher College. She represented our Educator Workforce Task Force. The work that group is doing continues to be quite impressive. They are focusing on the Universal Elementary Education Licensure Degree Transfer Program. Dean Adams is actually leading that initiative, and it will include 60-hour transfer framework that's aligned with our Gen Ed framework, allowing all of our elementary ed programs to be in alignment with each other. They will be engaging other partners, including the community colleges, very soon, and anticipate full launch of that program by fall of 2024. In addition, we discussed next steps with program review and the instructional workload. And we also received an update on where we are with the Gen Ed framework. So Basque is moving forward with a lot of very important initiatives.
Yes, you are. We appreciate that. Any questions for Regent Lane? Thank you all. All right, Region Ice, Fiscal Affairs and Audit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The committee conducted its agenda call on March 7th, and then, of course, met again this morning. There is apparently some perspective that the second half of the meeting this morning was particularly outstanding when Regent Harrison Lee led the group in my absence. And so thank you, Regent Harrison Lee, for doing that. We all appreciate it. So I may need some help from my friends as we go through the report to cover that part, but I think I have got a comprehensive download. So we, of course, did the obligatory approval of minutes. We did review the funding scenarios from the two-year colleges, and what we typically call the cost model. We'll actually talk about that in the discussion agenda, but in advance of that, the group agreed with the input from the Post-Secondary Technical Education Authority and the Interim Legislative Task Force for adjustments on the instruction rate for Tier 6, as well as applying a 3-year average that would help to smooth the impact of the cost model, both of which we would agree are positive steps. We got an update from Jim McMurray of the Kansas Development Finance Authority. He presented on the university's rates of indebtedness in the current bond market, showed combined indebtedness and a comprehensive review of our various bonding ratings. He recommended the board consider requiring the universities to include their debt burden ratio, debt service coverage, and viability ratio at the time of each debt authorization in their submission to the board, which I think we believe we generally do, but affirming that was their recommendation. And I think there was alignment around that. And they also volunteered to do some additional work on capacity for us if we were so inclined, and that would require some preliminary work if we were inclined to do that to make sure we had our assumptions right. And then each year we hear an update from each of our universities about their financial outlook. Today, Kansas State, Emporia State, and the University of Kansas all presented. So that leaves us one, Fort Hays, that we'll hear next time. So I will get to enjoy that one as I missed the others today. And then we looked at our work plan and would report all is well there, where everything will be done on time. What did our CEO say earlier? On time and under budget. Maybe not under budget.
Early and
earlier. Okay, early and under.
Questions for Region Ice? All right. Regent Harrison Lee, anything you want to add from your time with the gavel there?
No, he's captured it quite well.
Okay,
Happy
thank
to
you.
assist.
All right, governance report. Before I give that, let me correct something. The Early College Academy at WSU Tech is with the Mays School District, not the Goddard School District. So 2 on the west side of Wichita. I got the wrong one. Anyway, I know I should go to Wichita sometime, maybe tomorrow. But the Mays School District there. Okay, governance report. The governance committee met this morning after approving the February meeting minutes. The committee received the annual Emporia State University Campus Safety and Security Report. We then approved the board president's execution of an agreement with KU, received information about and discussed the 2024 University CEO assessment tool, and renewed the new Regent orientation process. The committee will further discuss the CEO assessment tool and process in April, and will seek the chancellor's and president's feedback on proposed changes before bringing final recommendations to the board. That, my friends, is the governance report. I'm now any questions? I guess I should ask. All right, let's pitch it over to Regent Harrison Lee for the retirement plan report. Regent Harrison Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the Retirement Plan Committee held its semi-annual meeting. We met on yesterday. Our financial consultant Advanced Capital Group presented its semi-annual investment review. Based on their recommendations, the committee voted to keep 3 funds available through TIAA on a watch list. The committee received ACG's analysis of plan lineup changes submitted by TIAA. Based on the recommendations, the retirement committee voted to table for further evaluation TIAA's proposal to execute share class changes for 8 funds. However, the committee voted to support a proposal to execute share class changes for 5 non-proprietary funds. The committee also received ACG's analysis of plan lineup changes submitted by Voya. Based on ACG's recommendation, the committee voted to reject 2 of these, to support the remaining 9, and to adopt ACG's recommendation on specific fund selection relative to each supported change. Recommendations for TIAA and Voya plan lineup changes will be submitted to the board for final approval at its next regular meeting. And finally, we had an executive session to discuss some legal matters with our legal counsel. Mr. Chair, that completes the Retirement Plan Committee report.
Thank you, Regent Harrison Lee. Any questions? All right, there we go. Next up is the approval of our consent agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve our consent agenda?
So moved.
Move. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it, Mr. Chair.
All right, second. Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, consent agenda passes. Now we're up to the discussion agenda, section 6A, academic affairs. Provost Bicklemeyer would come on up and talk about the request to offer a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice at the University of Kansas.
Good afternoon, Regents, and thank you for the opportunity to present in front of you today. The University of Kansas has a proposal, as Chair Rolfe mentioned, of a request to offer a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice at KU and our School of Professional Studies, which is on the Edwards campus in Overland Park. Just to remind you of the path of this proposal to this point in time. And what you have in your packet is the proposal. You have letters of opposition to the program from Wichita State and from Emporia State. You also have a number of letters in support of the program from mayors of several cities in Johnson County, as well as chambers of commerce and some government officials as well. The process of this program proposal coming to you is that at the Council of Chief Academic Officers, it was voted 3-3. 3 in support and 3 opposed. At the Council of Presidents in February, it was voted 3-3 with those same institutions supporting and opposing. And then at the Board of Academic Affairs Standing Committee, it was voted 4-0 to approve the proposal. And so now it comes to you in that regard. To give you some background about the details of the proposal, it's an undergraduate degree completion program, again, in criminal justice through the School of Professional Studies at Overland Park. To remind you that the KU Edwards campus in Overland Park focuses on offering undergraduate degree completion programs in areas of needed workforce development in the Kansas City area. And by undergraduate degree completion, we mean we are in partnership there strongly with Johnson County Community College as well as with KCK Community College increasingly. So the programs there are generally the 3rd and 4th year of bachelor's programs. There are, again, numerous government leaders in Johnson County who've represented multiple constituencies, providing those supports, letters of support, as well as a state senator. And the Johnson County Research Education Authority has provided a letter of support for the program as well. And of course, JCERT has some funding authorities over the Johnson County campus, although it is not funding this program specifically. We had collegial conversations with the provost at Wichita State and with Fort Hays State about their concerns. And I want to emphasize the need that we have to serve the workforce development needs in Kansas City. And this is in our service area. I have asked Stuart Day, who is the Dean of the School of Professional Studies, to join me. He's online. He's going to give you a bit of the details and the data behind the program, and then I'll give you a quick summary statement. Stuart?
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. I'm happy to be here today. As Provost Bicklemeyer said, this is a hybrid and online criminal justice degree program, a BSBA. Really what we're trying to do is meet the growing employment demands of law enforcement, corrections, policy, and courts administration related to workforce in the Kansas City metro area and greater Kansas and Missouri region. It's designed for undergraduate students with a strong interest in understanding how agencies and institutions function as part of the criminal justice system. As you know, and as the provost mentioned, the mission of Edwards campus is workforce development programs. That's why our undergraduate programs, including criminal justice, are high flex. That is, they're offered in a hybrid format and online. The program is a degree completion program designed to support transfer students from local community colleges. The program admits students once they've completed 60 or more credit hours. Current data and trends show the working students prefer this high flex and online program format, so even local students. Current data also shows that 75% of students who enroll in online programs do so within a 100-mile radius of their home. So this does not present competition to WSU or FHSU programs. Data from KBOR's KEH Stats website, which Gene Rediker can share if you would like, indicate that WSU and FHSU draw few students from Johnson County and from Wyandotte County into their criminal justice programs. So there's not appear to be a threat that KU will take students from these two institutions. And then marketing research shows the heaviest job growth in criminal justice in our region to be in St. Louis and Kansas City. And both of those are strong markets for KU. So I'll pass it back to the provost now.
Thank you, Dean Day. So just in sum, I would want to note that we're proposing a program here that's within our service area that meets a clear market need, that has a strong level of support from government officials in that area. It meets the KU campus's mission for workforce development, and it's in a format that's preferred by the target student group that we're addressing there, and that the data indicate that we are not likely to be competing with programs at Wichita State or Fort Hays State. I'd also note that we have strength in this area. Generally, we have one of the top ranked School of Public Affairs administrations in the country on the Lawrence campus, where we draw some of our collective intellectual capacity to deliver this program. And we also are responsible for the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center, where we have a strong connection to feed the program as well. So for these reasons, we believe our proposal has strong merit and it should be approved. And I am happy to stand for questions.
Questions for Provost Bickelmeyer? Thank you for the presentation. For discussion, Regent Winter.
Barbara, you mentioned that there was strong support from local officials for this in the Johnson County area. How do you know that? What do you do to identify that support?
In your packet, you'll find letters of support. I don't know the page numbers behind this proposal. I think it's past page 57, 58. You have letters here from, let me get to where I need to be, from from Senator Dinah Sykes. You have letters from the mayor of the city of Leawood. You have a letter from the vice chair of the Kansas City Chamber and vice chairman of the Commerce Bank. You have a letter from the president of the Overland Park Chamber, a letter from the mayor of Lenexa, as well as a letter from the Mid-America Regional Council Executive Director David Warm, and a letter from the mayor of Overland Park.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, comments? Regent Dicus.
I'll ask you the same question I asked K-State last month. With the RPK study, how does this, align with that in looking at either redundancy or duplication that you mentioned in the write-up on this? From a board, if we're looking at that with the number of institutions that have this program, how do we put the two of those together and say this is fine when others have this same program?
Again, that's one reason why we wanted to make sure we provided the data to you about what we know about the program. And again, as we were discussing, I think in Basque earlier this morning, the word duplication's been shared a lot in the RPK language. You would see they talked about duplication is not in and of itself an inappropriate thing to do. There's duplication for distinction, which I think goes to the K-State program and what they were trying to do. And there's also duplication based on need. And there's certainly market data to show that there's a great need. There's a lot of support for this. And again, the data that we showed about the current transfer rates of students or the not transfer rates, but the current student going rates of students from Overland Park in Fort Hays programs or in Wichita State programs is there's not a high number of students from Overland Park there. Working adults can't easily move when they're trying to take a program, and there's clear market data to show that there are many job openings in Kansas City and St. Louis, which is what Dean Day was referring to. So I think it falls in that category of there's a clear demand, and so duplication is appropriate.
Regent Benson.
Mr. Chairman, I just want a clarifying point. You did mention that it passed 4-0 through Basque, and I just want to make clear that there was vigorous conversation during the Basque meeting because the institutions that expressed concerns, I thought they articulated those concerns very well. For me personally, going back to the K-State presentation last month, one thing that stuck with me that Provost Tabor mentioned was as far as the sustained demand, the increased professionalism of the law enforcement community. So that kind of reassured my concerns that it's going to be a long-term demand. But then I thought Provost Bickelmeyer did a good job of articulating the local demand in terms of, I believe, 82% of the students that you attract are from your service area. But also just with Kansas City's geographic location, it also allows you to better compete with neighboring states that are still fairly close to the Kansas City area. But just didn't want anybody to get the impression that it was rubber stamped and that we didn't hear those concerns that were offered by those other institutions, because they were heard and they were valid, and we had to work through those.
Thank you for the additional detail.
Yes, Regent Lane.
Thank you very much, Regent Benson. Well said. I mentioned this comment in our conversation, so I don't know if Dean Day or you, Provost Bickelmeyer, want to take it, but with the high demand factor that you've demonstrated, I still am puzzled by the yield that we're expecting in year 3, which is 35 full-time and 30 part-time students. Can you help square that in my thinking?
Generally, we always come in rather conservative in numbers in terms of wanting to build a program and not to overpromise and underdeliver. We'd rather underpromise, overdeliver. But secondly, beyond that, we build the program, and so generally you get students in, and the student connection also creates greater students. So you generally will see a trend line up on an annual enrollment basis, and part of that is our own advertising to support that. So we'll start a little bit slower with our advertising, social media, and recruitment into the program, and then ramp up, because some of it is also cross I don't want to say cross subsidizing, but cross using our faculty to get them into the program as we begin to deliver it.
Other questions or comments from the regents on this? It's an interesting one because it came out with a 3-3 vote. I appreciate that kind of robustness. That's a sign of a healthy culture to me, that we can have disagreements and talk about that and work it out, and then continue to work together on things moving forward. So that's great. I appreciate the work that Basque did on this and continuing to better out the details, so to speak. And it is an interesting time frame for us as we're kind of in the gray zone of the RPK study and further defining even our perspectives on duplication and working that out in real time. And then also awaiting some feedback on, just how we evaluate new programs and how we evaluate programs that need to go away. So we're kind of in an interesting time with this, but without hearing any further discussion, is there a motion to approve?
I would move for approval.
I would second.
A move to approve and a second. Any further discussion or questions from the regents? All right, hearing a motion approval, no further discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Same sign. All right, passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's look here. Keep going. Next up. We'll do break after this one.
Oh, okay.
Yep. That's what I was just checking. We haven't even been an hour in. We gotta be an hour in before we take a break.
I knew you'd say no the first time, though.
All right, Elaine, thank you for coming up. We're on tier rates for instruction and cost model.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Getting ahead of myself. All right. So you feel free to speed me up or slow me down as we go. The members of Fiscal Affairs have heard this a number of times, as has our House Higher Ed Budget Committee, as well as the Tech Ed Authority. So today we're here to talk about the state aid that's distributed to the community and technical colleges for their, which you might call their adult students. So not the Excel and CTE students, although the cost model is used for that. Today we're focusing in on the tiered and non-tiered courses. And this all goes back to the creation of the cost model, which was 2011 Senate Bill 143, which was creation from the Tech Ed Authority's discussion prior to that. At the patchwork that we had prior to 2011, this was a remedy to unify how state aid is delivered to the two-year colleges to deliver courses for Kansas resident students. So this is to deliver the courses. This isn't for a college's student unions and bookstores and operation of an athletic department or a dorm. This is for the cost to deliver courses. Another feature that I do want to mention that is not something that is available to how the state aid is calculated or addressed for the state universities. There is an annual inflation adjustment applied throughout in the model. So the college's increased costs over time are recognized. That is a feature of the cost model, instructional cost model. Again, this is the usage of this cost model relates to how we spend now $200 million of state general fund. So it is important for the board to understand how this is created. We look at first the expenses, but we also take into consideration how those expenses are financed. And we're going to get into that a little bit, but depending on the enrollment of the student, you generate a certain proportion of state aid for each of your courses. So if you are attending a community college as an in-district credit hour student, so if you're from Johnson County going to Johnson County Community College, you are expected to be contributing in state aid for 1/3. So 1/3 from the student tuition, 1/3 from the local property tax, 1/3 from the state. If you are from Douglas County and you go to Johnson County Community College, 2/3 of your courses cost then would be delivered by the state and state aid, and 1/3 by the student tuition. Same for all of the technical college. Every student in Kansas is considered a resident or in district, so they're 1/3, 2/3. The state aid for the Excel and CTE program is 100% state. So there are 4 elements to the cost model when we look at the expense side. The extraordinary costs that they're in yellow, those are specific to only the tiered courses. But for all courses, we have institutional support and instructional support. You can think of those as the college's overhead expenses to run their campus, and the instructor costs, the faculty expenses that it takes to deliver the courses. We aggregate all of the information from the student enrollment in which type of course, and that becomes the course costs. And then you aggregate all of the course costs to get to the college's calculated total expenses. And there's a table here, and you have received this much of this presentation in advance, so I'm not going to dwell on this, just to give you the sources for each of the 4 elements. Where does all of this information come? It comes from the institutions themselves. The extraordinary costs, we do not have a national source for that or a typical source, so we do rely directly on the institutions. We do periodic surveys of them for their extraordinary costs. So if you think of a welding course, what materials and facilities you need to deliver those courses, that's the yellow part there at the bottom. The blue, the 3 items in blue that apply to all courses, they either come from the two-year college's financial audits or the National Higher Education Benchmarking Institute, which happens to be housed at Johnson County Community College. That is a national benchmarking institute for all of two-year schools. So when you think, we talk about the different tiers and the different years of how we've used the cost model, there are 25 composite rates. So depending on the expense that it takes to deliver a course, we tier every course into one of these categories. We have every year's numbers there for you so you can see the progression. With the inflationary factors taken into account, the composite rates have increased over 45% on average over the time period. CPIU, an equivalent time frame, is about 36%, just as a point of reference. So just going through really quickly each item, the instructional cost model, we have our instructors. That's the core of what it takes to deliver a course. You've got to have a faculty. We do rely on the National Benchmarking Institute, and they collect national data for faculty. We use a 3-year average of the most recent data. We did run into a snag this year. It took a little bit longer than it typically does to collect this information, so it delayed publication of our gap report. I would note not every Kansas college participates in this study, but some of them do. But that is what we rely on for our instructor data. And there you can see the rates for each of the different tiers through time. And we're going to talk a little bit about tier 6. Tier 6 has 2 columns for this year for 2022. The vote of the post-secondary TEA was to keep the 21 tier 6 rate the same for 2022 rather than dropping it. The data that we collected from the Benchmarking Institute would suggest that it should have been reduced. But the TEA believed that it was in this environment that we're in, that it needed to be staying the same and not be dropped. The overhead costs for academic support and student services, we pay $49 a credit hour for all the courses. And again, that's just based on what everybody spends across the system for very specific programs and services that the community colleges and technical colleges deliver. And there's the rates. Used to be $31 back in 2011, and now we're up to $49. Institutional support, same thing. So you're going to have people managing the college, operating it, operating the physical infrastructure of the campus. So for that, we pay $58 per credit hour. And it used to be $38 back in 2011. So you see the amounts there as they've adjusted over time. And then with the extraordinary costs in the model, then again, only for the tiered or technical courses. And they are based on information that we collect from the schools. They are adjusted either if we don't do an actual data collection from the schools, we have adjusted those by the rate of inflation. So every year there has been a review of the data, even though there isn't always a data collection. And again, depending on the tier and the level of expense, we have them grouped into 4. And there are some that are at 0, and they go all the way up to $127 for 2022. So that's the expense side. Looking then at the revenue side, how are those expenses covered? So you see the third, a third, a third, the third, 2/3, third, 2/3, depending on who you are, or the 100% for Excel and CTE. And just an example, I have a Phantom Green Valley Community College. If someone is taking a computer and information systems class, applied networking one, that is a very specific expense in our cost model. It's $297 per credit hour according to our cost model. And this is a 2-hour course. So the total course rate is $594. And you could see there then, he's an in-district student. So he would generate $198 in state aid. Jane, she's a student at Russell Area Technical College, and she's studying wind energy technology. She's in small wind turbine, which is a composite rate 2 course. That is a $302 per credit hour rate. So 302 times 3 is $906 for the course. And so she generates $604 in state aid. So there's the cost model in a hypothetical sense, how all of the data is aggregated and used to calculate the college's expenses. But then there is the impact that legislative provisos have on how we administer or use the cost model or don't use the cost model. So for every year from 2012 through 2023, there have been some different variety of provisos that the legislature has attached to the funding for tiered and non-tiered course credit hour aid. And this just happens to be the example from 2013. basically it's telling the Board of Regents, give the colleges about what they got in 2014 than they did in 2013. So whether their enrollment went up or down, give them about the same. For the current year, we're in fiscal year 2023. Last year's legislature, for the first time since adoption of the cost model in 2011, fully funded the cost model. Up until this year, every year, we had a gap in state funding, hence the annual gap report. So in the way that they approved the funding, they said no college is going to have lower tiered or non-tiered state aid relative to the prior year. So if a college's enrollment would have resulted in lower state aid, they were going to just be held the same. So you could think of that as a hold harmless. Now in the proviso, which is on the next slide, there is to be a 3-year migration to full adoption of the cost model for the first time. So in 2023, the year we're in now, colleges with no gap held at the 2022 state aid level. Everybody got held same, or if your enrollment had gone up and you were eligible for more state aid, you got the additional state aid. The year that we're now planning for, fiscal year 2024, they are to be planning to retain only 50% of what might be called overfunding. And then in fiscal year 2025, state aid would be fully recentered and distributed according to the instructional cost model calculations. And here's the proviso that just basically says, here's the 3-year plan to fully recenter. So just as a refresher, there is a timeline for when we collect the enrollment data and when the state aid is distributed. So there is a time gap, if you will, from when enrollments are funded. So last summer, back in July into September, the colleges provided their enrollment data to the board office, and which does require a presidential certification. So there's a sign-on, a secure system where they submit their information. They can generate reports that tell them which students are getting funded or which ones are not. And then there is a step where the president goes in and says, yep, that's the data, we certify that. Then sometime in the winter, which I underline that's a little bit different. Usually it's in the fall. We get this instructor cost data from Johnson County Community College, the National Higher Ed Benchmark Institute. Then back in fall, we also calculate everybody's instruction and institutional support data derived from the data we have in their audits. In winter, we then go through the expense again, the time again to calculate all the extraordinary costs. And we aggregate all the course enrollments, student by student, course by course, and we develop the scenarios that are going to be talked about here today. So the gap report, we present that to the TEA annually, usually in January, sometimes in February. This was presented back to the TEA in February. And then we find out, what does a legislature do with the funding for tiered and non-tiered? Some point in time, there will be an appropriation with a proviso that will tell us, if there is a proviso, what we have to do with the funding. Then sometime in May, at the end of May, when the TEA meets, then they would be improving, according to the proviso, if there is one, what would be the tiered and non-tiered amounts for this 2-year schools. And then we would stand before you in June to do the same thing we do every June, which is to ask for your approval of the amounts for 2024. By statute, we make those payments to the schools. The first half goes in August and the second half goes in January. That schedule has been in statute the entire time. And just a little bit of background there, just the student credit hour production. We're talking about just over 1 million student credit hours in AY 2022 for purposes of the instructional cost model. Community colleges delivered 85% of those credit hours. Technical colleges, 15%. Of the tiered courses, so the middle pie there, 70% came from our community colleges, 30% from the tech colleges. And in the final slide there, for the community colleges, how many were in district versus out district students? 40% were in district, I'm sorry, 46% were in district, 54%, so slightly more than half were from out district for the community colleges. And then just to give you a sense for, well, what proportion of the student enrollment or student credit hour production comes from the non-tiered courses. So the bulk of what the community colleges do, they do deliver a great deal of our technical courses, but the blue, the non-tiered gen ed courses that transfer, that's the bread and butter of the community colleges. And you can see the production there for each of the schools or the cost model calculations for 2022. And we have the same for the tech colleges. Only 7 of them, different scale. All right, so that's the KBOR instructional cost model for the 2-year colleges in a nutshell. And then next, we can talk about the scenarios. And while Steve pulls that up, I can point out that this document has been put on our website with the agenda materials for today's meeting, in case anybody needs to pull that down. All right, thank you, Steve. So we have 4 scenarios, and for each scenario, there's a matched pair. The yellow striped pages go with the green striped pages. The yellow are the technical tiered courses, and the green pages are the non-technical classes. So the scenario 1 is simply the typical gap report that we gen up every year that shows what compared to the current year, what are the calculations that are calculated for each college from their enrollments? Who was in district, who was out district, how does that add up? And what's the gap? And as we talked about this morning, you have to think about it a little backwards in your head, because where you see a negative number in red, that means that the cost model is saying the college is overfunded, if you will, according to the prior year. And if there is a black positive number, that is where the gap is. So it's a little not intuitive. It's backwards of what you might be thinking. So again, the first 2 pages, simply the typical gap report. Then moving on 2 pages back to scenario 2. There we go. Thank you. So scenario 2 takes scenario 1, but then alters the tier 6 instructor rate to hold the rate flat from 2021. So that is a $668,000 variance across the entirety of the system that will pay for a slightly higher rate for those tier 6 courses. Same calculation otherwise, just the instructor rate varies. And then moving back 2 more pages, scenario 3. Scenario 3 gets a little more complicated because now we're incorporating some other features. The first of which was agreed to by the interim task force with several legislators, representatives of the 2-year colleges, as well as Dr. Flanders, where it was recommended that the legislature and the Board of Regents consider adopting a 3-year average. So rather than looking at 1 year at a time every year for how the cost model is calculating their expenses and their state aid, take a 3-year average. And so this scenario does that 3-year averaging, compares it to the 2023 base, and then gives you a slightly different gap. Now, what's different on this slide, and this is what has been quite confusing to people in the past, the gap report is not necessarily the college's funding report. And this scenario incorporates the additional feature that we talked about, that 3-year migration. This is year 2. So in year 2 of the 3-year migration to recentering, a college gets to retain half of their overfunding. So that feature there is shown in the last column. And I'm going to stop here. We only have 1 more scenario, but before we get to that one, that involves a little different feature. Scenario 3 is sort of where we've landed with the Fiscal Affairs Committee.
You want to take questions?
Yes.
Any questions before she shows us the final scenario? Okay. Why don't you show us the final scenario? Thank
All
you,
right.
Elaine. You're doing a great job making a complicated thing understandable.
Okay, thank you. Going back then to scenario 4. Again, these are the yellow pages with the technical courses. The only difference here compared to scenario 3 then is incorporating a 5% inflationary adjustment for, it says personnel costs for operating expenses. So inflation clearly an issue for everyone at this point in time. So one proposal has been to factor in a 5% inflationary factor. And when you do that for both tiered and non-tiered, there isn't quite enough money in the budget to get to incorporate that. So on the far right-hand column of both the scenario 4 pages, we have prorated the colleges to make them fit proportionally. So that's the only other feature that's added in the 4th scenario.
Okay. This was worked through fiscal affairs, correct? Do you want to have any comment, Regent Ice?
I think well presented, but it was in, we were asking fiscal affairs, I think 4 times, going through the details of how it works. I know you well recall that in November, this came before the whole board. We were waiting for TEA. So I have nothing to add to the presentation. I'll add a little bit to what our perspective was. So scenario 3 then really, I would say, represents what we would call the inputs from the various groups that have some responsibility in this. So first, the tier 6 rate came from a recommendation of the post-secondary technical education authority. I mentioned this in my committee report. The smoothing of the 3-year averaging, which I'm calling smoothing because that's what it does, came from the legislative task force that had various legislative members, President Flanders and representatives from the community and technical colleges. They recommended the smoothing. That's also in scenario 3. And then lastly, the transition to full cost model that was passed in the legislature. So from our perspective, that really meant that 3 represented the inputs from the involved circumstance of all of our parties. That made us inclined to endorse. The 4th scenario that adds inflation in, that's being considered by the legislature now. We really don't need to weigh in on that. On the one hand, we put inflation in our recommendation, so we'd be aligned with that. On the other hand, you could make an argument that inflation is inherent in the cost model calculation. So again, we didn't think we needed to weigh in on that because the legislature is already using that moving forward as we understand it.
I know we got President File and President Jeanette here. Do you guys are endorsing this idea with the 3-year average? I got a thumbs up from both of you. Let the record show. Thank you. Okay, that's good. Sometimes it's good to slow down and work through things together. So appreciate everybody's work on that. Appreciate fiscal working through this. President Flanders, did you have anything? Okay. Anybody else have questions or comments? Elaine, you know you made a good presentation when there's this few questions. That's good. Good work on your part. All right. We do need to act on this. Is there a motion to approve this as presented, or do I need to call it out as option 4 or scenario?
I think we'd rather, so that we're not accidentally sending any sort of message about the inflation. I think from fiscal's perspective, what we would suggest is the motion should suggest the cost model is updated with on the tier 6 rates and the 3-year average.
Is that a motion?
Yes, sir.
All right. I hear a motion.
Second.
Renee, were you able to capture that for the minutes? Okay. I hear it moved and seconded. Do I hear any further discussion? All right. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right. Motion carries. Thank you. I know you're up next on the agenda, but we're going to take a 10-minute break. So we'll see you back here just before 3. Thank you. There's only one way to get this thing. Start getting everybody back. I like that we're friendly. We like being together. It's good. Good. Let's see if we got enough in the room. All right. Elaine, before you go real quick, Regent Lane had missed one part of her report. She wanted to make sure she had a chance to say, so you can stay up there, but let's turn our attention to the one and only Regent Cynthia Lane.
Thank you, Jonathan. So I really shortchanged the report on the Educator Workforce Task Force. I mentioned the Universal Elementary Ed Licensure Program, but they've done significant work in the area of structured literacy with a plan to launch this summer, training that will be going through modules of the different pieces of structured literacy. They're also going to focus on high needs populations such as special ed, English limited language learners, and dyslexia. That all starts this summer. So they call that their quick start plan. They also are developing a long-term plan to ensure that all current in-service teachers have access to resources and support. So it's pretty remarkable to see the system moving forward with such urgency in that area. That work is being led by Dean Deb Mercer and Dean Jim Truelove. So I wanted to mention that. They also are supporting KSDE's focus on the registered apprenticeship program. And for the time being, and we want to wait and see how the apprenticeship program goes. They're putting on hold work on what we call the tiered workforce options for educators, which we shorthand as the teacher cadet program, because they don't want to be in competition with the development of the apprenticeship opportunities. So those two important things: structured literacy moving at a rapid pace with training happening as early as this summer. They have expert teams formed and working to support the registered apprentice program that KSDE will be leading. So thank you for allowing me to amend my report.
Thank you. As you know, I'm a big fan of the structured literacy stuff. So thank you for your work and the work of the universities on that. Now we're going to come back to Elaine on an enrollment report. We'd love to receive this.
Okay, so what I will be talking to you today about looks back. So this is a retrospective looking back to academic year 2022. So this is part of why I think we're creating a dashboard, so we have more current, more recent information, but this is looking back in time. And none of this, of course, is possible without the many staff at the campuses, as well as our own data research and planning team at the board office and our IT folks who help us generate all of these reports. And we use this information, we can leverage it not only to respond to legislators' data requests, which are quite numerous at times, but we create things like our degree stats portal, our military portal, the data books, which you all have been given copies of, as well as our Key Stats online reporting tool. And so we reference those throughout this presentation. So first of all, Key Stats. We have made some improvements there. We've added some tabs, some information in our enrollment to show you distance education as a delivery method type. So if you have interest on that, we're going to talk about that. We have added retention information, graduation rates, and tuition information as well. In our enrollment tab, we also have Pell recipient summary information as well. So again, looking back at 2022, the full academic year. Sometimes we're going to talk a little bit about just fall census, but for the most part, we're going to reference the entire year, which is the fall, spring, and summer semesters. Our system-wide headcount and our FTE continue to drop. So our 1 year rate of change, the rate of decline is slowing. Our 1 year change on headcount is 2.2% and 2.5% for FTE. From our peak year as a system, so again, as a system of our public institutions of higher ed, state universities, Washburn University, community colleges, technical colleges, we are down 15.2% from our peak, and we are down 14.4% on FTE students. So we report head count, which is just a person is a person, that's one. FTE, if you are enrolled in 15 credit hours as an undergraduate, then that equates to a full-time 1.0. So if you take only 12 hours, which is full-time for financial aid purposes, you don't quite count as one. So that's the equivalent, the FTE equivalent calculation that we make in tracking students. So you see the two scales there. So in 2022, we had 219,604 students head count and 123,781 in FTE students. Looking at race and ethnicity then, the majority of our students are reporting themselves as white. You can see the rate of change though, where the decline from 182,000 down to 137,000. So each of these groupings shows our student counts from on a head count basis by group from 2012 to 2022. So 10 years. Our Hispanic student counts have grown. We are up 46% from 2012, and our Black student enrollments down 30% from 2012. We have grouped all others. We do, when we collect information, and we're going to go through this, we do have a number of students, it's just not reported, or we get something that's misreported, and so we report them as unknown. Looking at students by age group, again, same grouping, 2012 through 2022. Younger than 20, we have grown. Those are our high school students for the most part, but not entirely. Some of our adult students are also in that group. Ages 20 to 24, the bulk of who we serve, declining, 104,000 almost to 86,000 almost. Our older students, rapidly declining, 59,000 back in 2012, ages 25 to 34, down to 40,000. And our older students, those over 35, also declining as well. Looking at gender then, males and females. Females are greater majority of our students. This is a head count, so one person is a person here. We don't count on FTE. We are down on females, 13.6% over the last 10 years. Males were down 17%. On average, females have made up about 54.5% of our enrollment. But in the last 2 years, that proportion has grown slightly to 56%. The technical colleges are the only sector where female enrollment by a percentage is less than the males. And even at the tech colleges, they're 48%. Residency. How are we doing with Candace residents? We are down, and that's the blue line, from 218,000 down to 168,000 in 2022. And again, this is across the entirety of the system. Our non-residents, though, we have grown from 40,689 up to over 51,000. So we are attracting more non-resident students to our state. Now, focusing only on the 6 state universities plus the Med Center. Same graph as for the system. Blue line head count, yellow line FTE students. You can see there the decline last year, last 2 years. We are down overall 4.8% on a head count basis over the 10 years, 6.5% on FTE. And State University headcount, international students. We had a change in reporting structure there. You see the difference for 2022. And that is a change in how Fort Hays is reporting their students who are on campus in China. They are not reported now as international. So what we might want to do, and we didn't have the opportunity to do this here, is to make this a more of an apples to apples comparison so that prior years are on the same basis. But you can see the makeup of our state universities, the counts for each of the universities, what proportion of our system-wide headcount are international students. The 1 year change, though, a lot of variance in for Wichita State up slightly 0.7%, but KU has dropped by 18%, K-State down 19.5%, and Pittsburgh and KU Med also down, with Emporia State also down dramatically.
Can I ask a question? So I know with the pandemic that, and you know, maybe some of the government policy that really hurt international students. Are we starting to see that come back in meaningful ways? Just what, I mean, it looks like it. Hard to read that graph, but I'm seeing some head nods. I mean, is it back to how it used to be, or is it President Muma?
I don't know if I have the exact data if it's back to pre-COVID, but there's been a huge spike in graduate international students, mostly from India for Wichita State. I don't know if that's the case for other institutions, moving into the computer science, data science, analytics type programs.
Chancellor?
Similarly, I don't think we're quite back to pre-pandemic, but we also have seen a significant shift in where those students are coming from, with significant growth from India and South America.
Great, thank you. Provost Tabor.
Hitting the wrong place. Yes, similarly, we're up, but we're not back to where we were. And it's going to take some real changes in the way we recruit in the international landscape to get back to where we were. It's not just location, but it's also the types of interests that we have. President Muma mentioned graduate. I think that there's a lot of increasing interest at the graduate level, international students that we can capitalize on.
Thank you. Go ahead, Elaine.
All right, moving on then just to Washburn University. They are a sector unto themselves as a municipal university. Their similar enrollment decline, a bit more dramatic than our state universities. Headcount down over 21% and an FTE basis down 22%. And you can see the numbers there across the bottom. Our community colleges are where we've seen the largest declines in enrollments as a sector. Together, we have dropped for all 19 schools on a headcount basis, 28%. Now, a large proportion of our community college students are on an FTE or they're on a part-time basis. So looking at FTE, they are also down 28% over the 10-year period. So they peaked in 2011 at the community colleges and they've been declining ever since. Our technical colleges, the one sector where we've seen an uptick, they had 1 year, last year, a little aberration there of a decline, but they are coming back on a headcount basis. They are up almost 53% over the last 10 years on a headcount basis. They have had great success with their Excel and CTE programs, and we're going to talk about high school students here in a moment. So the community colleges and the technical colleges, the percent of their credit hours delivered to high school students. So the grouping of bars on the left for the community colleges and then on the right for the tech colleges. So with the success of our Excel and CTE and dual enrollments, we have seen some substantial growth there in their serving of high school students. So of the community colleges, total credit hour production, over 17% in 2022 were for high school students, and over 35% at the technical colleges. And then switching gears, so not the entirety of the academic year, just the fall census. Wanted to also incorporate a bit of information on the private independent schools, the colleges and universities that are members of the Kansas Independent College Association, just to give you a sense of the scale on a head count basis. Where do they rank in terms of total enrollments? So they have slightly declined in the last 10 years as well. So they were at over 18,762. And this fall, 2022, they have declined to 16,863. And then switching topics a bit, we have this graph. It looks over a 10-year period by race and ethnicity, the change in counts of high school graduates over 10 years, their demographics. There are fewer students in our K-12 system are graduating who self-identify as white, and there are more students who self-identify as Hispanic or as multiracial. So where you see the Hispanic bar in the middle, we've increased our high school graduations by 2,500 students. Well, that's half, that's double, sorry. The entire total is 1,277. So our white students declining 1,700 and our multiracial students increasing 554. We do report periodically to the legislature about ACT scores. A lot of our schools are not using it as quite in the same way as they used to, but it is a benefit to our high school students who want to take the ACT. The state of Kansas will pay for the high school student to take the test. And as we've seen more students take the test, we have seen some decline in performance, also probably associated with the pandemic. So of the students who take the test and who graduate, so those who take the test but do not ultimately graduate high school, they're not in this mix. So only those who actually graduated high school and who took the ACT, 21% in 2022 met all 4 benchmarks for the ACT. And the benchmark scores are noted there to the left. English 18, math 22, reading 22, and science at 23. So ACT sets the benchmark, and Blake can speak to this far better than I, but it is a predictor for how well a student might perform at the college level. So if you score at the benchmark, you have at least a 50% chance of earning a B or a higher grade when you get to the corresponding college course or courses. And you can see the variance there for the English, reading, math, and science scores, comparing back to 2013. Splitting out then percent meeting ACT benchmarks by race and ethnicity. You can see there Asian students perform at the highest level of our groups, and our Black students are faring the worst in terms of their ACT scores, those who graduated using the ACT data that we have for our 2022 Kansas graduating seniors. You can see the variance there by race.
President Flanders?
Yeah, so then on the meeting all 4, that would be not a percentile, but a percentage.
Mhm.
So if we looked at that, Asian students, we would have that met all 4 benchmarks, it would be 42%.
Correct.
But on our Black students, it's actually 5%.
Yes.
Any other questions for Elaine at this point or comments? Yeah, Chancellor.
Elaine, this is all tenured data. You mentioned community colleges peaked in 2011. When did the system peak? The country peaked at 2008. When did our system peak?
I believe our system peaked in AY enrollment in 2012.
In 2012.
Mhm.
All right, continue.
All right. Same graph, but looking by family income. So those who have family income in excess of 150,000 and then group down to the poorest, lowest socioeconomic income. And similar, those who met all 4 benchmarks at the lowest income level, 8%. Those with the highest income level, 42%. And you can see each of the individual scores there. Our college going rate has been declining. We report this a lot to the legislature. So in the last year, about 44% of our high school graduates in Kansas entered a Kansas public post-secondary institution within 1 year of high school graduation. And it was about 45% last year. So this is a decline of 8.9 percentage points over the last 5 years and more than 11 percentage points over the last decade. So we were at about 55%. Our overall college going rate, so if you include those who go to those private institutions in Kansas, would be almost 49%. So if you add those together, and we know that we have students who do go out of state and they can go public or private out of state, that would be about another 11% of the total. So the total 21 for the data that we have, it's the 2021 high school graduating class, 59.5% went on to some post-secondary within 1 year of graduating Kansas high school.
Now, in-state private, are their enrollments up with that from 2015 to 2021, do you think?
We have
I thought they were similar to ours, so I'm just trying to figure out from a percent standpoint.
We have their overall enrollments. I don't necessarily have who in their enrollment mix is non-resident or resident.
Gotcha.
And I know Mr. Lindsay might be able to come to attend another meeting and he can relate.
I just was trying to figure that out. That's fine. President Flanders?
Yeah, so I think what's interesting is I'll hear this from policymakers sometime. They say, well, not every student needs to have a university degree, and of course we know that's true. But I would say this is everyone. This is those going to getting a short-term certificate. This is why this is really troubling to me, is because it's anyone choosing any post-secondary option. And I think we have to focus a lot of our work here.
Focusing in that, so we know the most, of course, about those who come to our institutions. And those who do come in 2021, those high school graduates, we have seen a decline across all of our demographic subgroups in the last 5 years. But we have seen some gaps in certain groups that are even more disparate. So the college going rate gap for Hispanic students, the gray bar there, 31.9% compared to their white peers has more than doubled. So we have a greater gap. We've talked for several years about the gap by race and ethnicity, and those gaps are growing. They're not shrinking. So for Black students, the light blue bar, the gap is 15.4 percentage points compared to 10 in 2015. And also looking at our public college going rates for high school students. So for students who are attending a high school where there are greater concentrations of students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. So if you are at a high school where there are more students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, your public college going rate is 32.6%, where if you go to a high school with a low concentration of students like that, your college going rate is over 52%. So again, there's a gap there in where our students are coming from. I think there's just 25 percentiles, group 25.
To be in the high concentration group, does that mean 50% or more of the students in that high school are eligible for free and reduced?
Yes, so
50%.
The low concentration would have fewer than 25% of their students qualifying. And the high poverty or the high concentration would be in excess of 75% of the students. So there's 25% quartiles.
Thanks.
Elaine, well done on putting all this together. With respect to college, the percentage of college going rate, do we have any data about why? Have we asked the students what is inhibiting their decisions to attend post-secondary?
I would throw that question to our CEO friends.
I'm of course interested in hearing from them as well.
It's easiest to hear from those you serve.
And if we don't know.
We obviously don't talk to the people that don't come to us. So, I mean, it's the challenge, right? We know the ones that we do have and that apply, but
Is there any organization out there that's trying to find out what's at work here?
I'm sure there is, but I mean, if you look at all the data just presented, that one in particular, there's a direct socioeconomic correlation, and cost has got to play into that. I mean, it's all through this data that's a direct correlate by any one of these data points you want to look at.
Yeah. President Flanders.
Yeah, so it is cost, but it's also people aren't aware of the aid that is available to them. So it's perceived as unaffordable, even when many times it may be affordable. So, you think about tools that we have, SB 155, Promise Act, all of those things. But if you're coming out of an environment where it's never even been discussed as an option, then you're not even looking for that option. And so I don't think there's a magic answer here. I'm just saying that's what I hear.
Yes, Provost Tabor.
So I am aware of some data, national data that addresses this. So Gallup's done a number of polls in attempting to address this. And what they're finding is that there's a reduced confidence in higher education in this country. And part of that's driven by a perception that the value of higher education is not as great as the cost of higher education. So when people do that value cost comparison, they're believing that the value is not worth the cost. I think, in my opinion, is that the best traction that we can make is by addressing both sides of that. As President Flanders said, addressing the cost through need-based aid and other sorts of help that we can give, but also making sure that we're clear about what the value of higher education is.
Yeah, President Flanders, thank you.
Oh, that spurred a thought. We did have a study that showed it was that value and cost with the factor of that I have a 50% chance of not making it through. So if you just took the value and cost, it's pretty simple. It's going to really pay off. But if you also throw in the mix, well, I don't have a really great chance of finishing. That was one component that really drug it down.
President Ship.
I would just add to that. I think that I've also seen some national data that shows it's a scissor graph of the growth of first generation students that are weighing that opportunity along with the growing cost of higher education and thinking about, I need to get into the workforce right now because it's too expensive and I don't know that I'll make it. But it really, I can almost find it. Give me 5 minutes, I could, but there's a scissor graph that explains this on the national level.
President Muma.
Yeah, we studied this extensively at Wichita State, and it boils down to two things. Low income individuals, they just do not have the opportunity to even think about going to school. They're not willing to take loans out because of this value proposition. That's why need-based aid is so important, to bring new people, particularly underrepresented minorities, first generation, as you know, they bring this Pell Grant. We need to fill that gap to get their full cost of attendance covered. And we were able to do that this past year. 1,300 new students were able to be helped by this investment that the governor made and the legislature made last year. And the other thing is that many of these students are coming from poor academic preparation, which, you know, there's a correlation there, you know, as well. So it's really those two things that really drives this, or is not driving these students going to school.
Thank you. One question about this data, Elaine. Is this just in the next year post-graduation, or is this in the next 3 or 4 years post-graduation? If someone takes a gap year, they would show as not ever.
Yes, so we do track that, and I think the next year out adds maybe another 5 percentage points, but then it just declines.
So
And if you don't
take
get
more than
them,
1 year off, yeah.
they're just not coming.
Is that 5% across all 4 categories, or is that?
I believe so.
Okay. Regent Dicus.
No, I mean, we focus on this chart on the high concentration, but when you get to the low concentration, if that's, 75% of those students don't qualify for that, isn't that line a little more alarming? That's not the people who can't afford college, but 48% of them aren't going. I mean, that's, when you look at the numbers, that's almost more alarming than the higher concentration or the mid-high not going, because
They
they've
all
got
four
other
are
excuses.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
Chancellor?
I would say, I think what you don't see layered in this, and I bet it would reflect, is the percentage that are going out of state or private. I bet is much higher in that group. Right, so that this is only public. So I bet if in that group, those are the ones who probably are going out of state and probably are going private. So that number may actually be much higher than 52%.
That 11% that you mentioned that are going out of state more likely come from one of those two areas.
Is this all public school graduates, or all high school graduates, whether it's private, homeschool, or public?
I believe that is from our P20 data with K-12. So it's who they report as Kansas high school graduates. So I believe it includes homeschool students, but I would need to confirm.
In private school, you think?
And private school.
Okay, we're 2/3 through.
All right,
We'll keep going.
keep going. Similar public college going rates for the past 3 years that we have by race and ethnicity. You can see the decline for our Native American students, Asians holding quite steady, the decline for our Black students and our Hispanic students, as well as white, and our overall reduction there where we've declined on the far right. And very similar to the other bar chart, just the public, the concentration of our students and where they are and who's coming to our public colleges and universities from the high schools that have free and reduced lunch concentrations back to 2017. Our attainment rates then. So we graduate students, or we enroll students and we hope to graduate them. We do have some attainment gaps, and we are seeing more pronounced gaps than with the college going rate. So comparing Hispanic students to white, there is a 29 percentage point gap. And comparing our Black students to our white students, a 17% percentage point gap. So we're going to have to work on these things, and hopefully with our assistance from Georgia State, we can see some improvements there in our attainment gaps.
Can you explain why you have 25 to 64 and 25 to 34? What the significance is of breaking it down that way?
I believe that's mimicking what the Lumina Foundation, the data that they provided. And I believe that is going back farther in time on the scale above, but I'd have to check with our data folks who prepared this for me.
Regent Dykes, do you have a question? Okay, thank you. That's what I was wondering too.
That could be. I'll find out. If we can find out, if we need to correct that, we'll find out and republish on the website. We do have students who come to our colleges, as we talked earlier, they are not quite yet prepared for college level coursework. And we do enroll students who need developmental education, sometimes termed remedial education courses. And you see there the percentage of students who enroll in some dev ed course. The first column, we group the sectors, state universities and community colleges where we see this. The first column, you are either in a math or an English or a reading course. And then the other column is simply you just needed math, something with college algebra assistance. And this is where we see the need for what Dr. Archer is working with on math pathways, helping students improve their outcomes with our math. We don't have quite as many students who need assistance with English and reading, but yet they are still there. So we do have some need for doing some developmental education work across our campuses. We've started showing this slide in recent years. So this is for the six state universities. And the total for all the campuses there is to the right. Of the students who are full-time, so they're at least taking 12 hours a semester. So they're attempting to go full-time. Are they taking an adequate load to graduate with a bachelor's degree in 4 years? The Board of Regents has set a policy that most of our baccalaureate degrees are 120 credit hours. So if you take 15 hours fall, 15 hours spring for 4 years, you will be complete. You'll graduate within 100%. So here, just a comparison of the students who are at least taking full-time course loads at the 12 credit hour level. Are they at least taking 15? And you can see some improvements there at some of our campuses. This is where you see students who are still going full-time, but they are still trying to work and fill in some other financial gaps, and that is impeding them to getting to the 100% graduation rate. Our serving of Pell eligible students is down as well. We were serving over 57,000 students across our sectors in 2014, and we are down to 38,825 in 2022. So there is an overall enrollment decline. But this is a pretty steep decline in the number of students we serve, and you can see that across all the sectors. The decline in the numbers and the percentages. Hopefully, as President Moon noted, the assistance that we're getting from the state legislature, the interest on our comp grant and our need-based aid might assist our students in improving those numbers.
Do we have, is there any reason why this has dropped so precipitously over this time frame? Anybody got a guess? Or something that they know? President Muma?
I think a couple of reasons. Cost of education is going up. Students that we're seeing coming to the university or thinking about coming to the university, they just can't see a path forward, and taking out loans is not an option. So they're doing something different, going into the workforce. And we just haven't had a lot of assistance, state assistance for this. That we're the lowest in the region and fourth lowest in the country. I don't know exactly why there's been that big of a decline before, but it's probably because of cost. It has gone up, and it's just been more difficult for people to think about going to Pell eligible students going to
So
school.
we've largely held tuition even through this in a lot of ways.
Well,
And I get the perception.
and this is over an 8-year period here. So when we've that's just been in the last 4 years that we've held tuition flat.
Yeah, but the rate of decline is about the same.
What's that?
The rate of decline is about the same.
It was 10,000 and 10,000 almost.
With the lower rates.
Yeah. Interesting. I know we're trying to attack this in multiple ways. You got FAFSA and the need-based aid. I'm wondering if there's a third leg of the stool or something else we need to be focused on. Region Ice, were you gonna say something?
I was just gonna say, I think also the perspectives about success probably come back into this conversation as well. In that same time frame, look how much those other stats dropped.
Yeah.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I think that's the importance of our concurrent and dual enrollment initiative. We need to help our young people build a vision that post-secondary is part of their future and get that started as early as possible. So the more we can work with our K-12 partners to find ways to expand those opportunities, I think we'll see some success. You have to have a vision that this is relevant. And a lot of our low-income students don't have that vision built anywhere else except for when they're at school. So I would hope that would be at least one leg of the stool.
Jim Benson?
And I will point out that was even in the students' recommendations earlier today. So I thought that was interesting that they are thinking the same way.
Smart students we got in our system. That's right. Okay, continue, Elaine. Thank you.
All right, so we're in home stretch here. Characteristics of entering students. So those who come, last fall, we did see an uptick in our headcount enrollments at our 6 state universities, both for the research and the regional universities. So
woo,
we see some good points
on.
here.
Get ahead in the right direction, right?
And we for our transfer students. So this slide is first time entering, those who are coming from high school to university. We also, of course, track those who come from our 2-year sector. And we do have some overall declines. You see, we peaked there back in 2019. So it could be that our efforts to improve program to program articulation will also facilitate this, but some work yet to be done with our transfer students.
President Mason, why the drop at Hayes? You think? Yeah. So it looks like you've just had a harder drop than the other folks.
I think, Mr. Chairman, if I might, I suspect that this is
China data,
may
yeah.
relate to a challenge we had with your conversion of student information systems.
Yep, I bet that's it.
I could be mistaken, but that might also be contributing to that. As I recall, that affected transfer, the monitoring of
It's
transfer.
the gift that keeps on giving, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay.
That would make sense. Yeah.
Okay.
She cursed under her breath.
So back to Regent Lane's point, our dual enrollment, you can see there, we do have some slight improvements there for 2022. So let's go over the different categories. CEP, concurrent enrollment partnerships, where the student, forget my terminology, where the student is enrolled at the high school campus. So they're not necessarily coming to the college, but they're getting college credit. So CEP courses are taught at the high school during the normal school day. But we also have opportunities where a student they do go to the college campus, and that's the dual enrollment option, where we're up slightly in 2022. And then we have flavors of both CEP and Excel and CTE. So Excel and CTE is where a high school student is allowed to take a technical course paid for tuition with state aid at the college campus. So when my nephew got his associate in electricians at North Central Tech, he had many high school students with him in his courses. So the opportunity for greater enrollment of our high school students while they're in high school and getting some high school credit or some college credit at the same time as they're doing high school helps set that vision for having college as a possibility for them. And then lastly, last slide. Distance ed. So this got a lot of bad rap during our pandemic, but we do deliver substantial number of credit hours online. And in AY 2022, we had 3.6 million total credit hours delivered. Of that, 34.4% were delivered online in some form. So this is a drop from 2021. But it is still slightly higher than in 2020. State universities accounted for over half of the total education credit hour distance ed credit hour production. You can see in the pie chart there in the dark blue on the right. And community colleges delivered 44% of their student credit hours online. So you can see the proportion on the left, what proportion of their total credit hours were delivered in distance ed. And on the right, of the distance ed courses, who taught which share. So you get a sense for how much we are delivering in some online version, some online fashion. And with that, I don't have any more slides for you.
Thanks, Elaine. Stay up there though. Questions or comments looking at this? Anybody have? I'd ask one question of this group. So when you think about the 36 slides you just saw, which ones, or one stands out in your mind that if we looked at it every month that we were together, it'd remind us of what's critical to our mission? Is there one that sticks out and doesn't need to be the same for everybody? I'm just curious, as you sit here having seen all that, if there's one that if you had to stare out every week would remind you of what's critical to our mission. Does anybody have one?
This is certainly what we hope the dashboard will allow us to facilitate. But for me, it's that college going rate and the dramatic differences in opportunities dependent on income.
Anybody else have one stick out to them in that way? Regent Dicus?
Question.
Yeah.
Yeah, President Muma, you'd mentioned the cost of going to college. I mean, we talk about student loans, the socioeconomic of these students. Do we ever address the cost of what it takes you all to provide an education? I mean, is there a way to reduce the cost of higher education other than, looking at the mix of whether it's state aid or tuition? I mean, just the overall cost of higher education. No, I'm just asking everybody. I mean, it's just one of those, I mean, as cost has gone up and the state's not doing it, whether, we froze tuition, but that's one of the other issues out there is just the overall cost of higher education. How you bring that down to make it more affordable. Chancellor.
Yeah, I think if you look at what's happened since 2008, we've done a lot of that, right? Where our state funding was fixed for 15 years. Initially, tuitions went up pretty fast in the first couple of years after that. And then it plateaued. And while we've been held flat 4 years here, I think KU's been 1.1% increase over 6 or 7 years. So for half of that time, the only way you can do that obviously is by managing costs. And so I think we've all been forced to do an awful lot of that, but there is only so much of that you can do as you juggle all the other requirements. At the same time, we're increasing our financial aid, which is another element. And the consequence of that are several. We've talked a lot about deferred maintenance. That's one of them, right? We've talked a lot about competitive wage. That's another one. There's only so many places you can really carve out money, and it's people and it's facilities.
President.
I'll just say that one of the things that we've been doing over the last 10 years is reallocating tuition towards need-based aid internally, not just relying on the state or private fundraising dollars. So although that's not decreasing the cost, it's a way to get additional federal aid, Pell eligible students, bringing that Pell grant that helps us bring more revenue to the institution that doesn't require us to increase costs in other ways. It's a little bit different way of thinking about it, but that's one of the things that we've been doing, and we're committed to continue to do that. We believe that helps us in the long run.
Regent Mendoza.
Just back to your question about the slides. I think there were multiple slides that showed different subgroups outperforming others. So just continuing to focus in on what are the access barriers for those particular subgroups and how can we continue to remove those barriers.
Thank you. Regent Winter. Can you get your mic?
By the way, about what we should be looking at with the NISS initiative. What slide is it? Retention? I forget the terminology, but isn't there a slide that shows the number of percentage or number of students that are retained that are moving on? Staying with us, I'm sorry.
That graduate.
From year to year that we keep.
We do have on our KeyStats website a retention feature in our enrollment, so we could easily pull that information.
Well, I think if you go back, he's talking about the one that shows what percent get to graduation. Is that, I think that was.
Well, and in the percent that persist, I guess, isn't that somebody help me?
Yes.
That stay for their sophomore year and stay for their junior year. Is that persistence rate?
Yes.
So that's what that's. I'm just thinking of, how can we?
No, I'm not. Let me ask, so Carl was saying, hey, none of these change on a monthly basis. To be clear. So like the Greater Wichita Partnership, there was a slide that showed coming out of the Great Recession, the job growth in every peer market in the Midwest and Wichita's job. And it was, we called it the spaghetti chart, but it showed that we were behind every peer market. It didn't change. We just looked at it every month and we're just like, this is why we're doing it. We're behind everybody else. So what I mean is what connects with our soul and kind of heart push and what we're doing, that you see it and you're like, gosh, if I could just be reminded, this reminds me why I get up and I lean into this every day. Does that make sense? A little more clarity.
No, I did understand that earlier, and it's probably a personality quirk on my part, but I believe I remember those things through time, and I don't need, it's like when something bad happens, we're not reminded we need to do good. We should know that fundamentally. So that's why you didn't hear an answer from me.
But you're very quirky. I'd agree. Anybody else have something that stuck out to them? That way. No one across the carpet here. Okay. Okay. All right. Any other questions for Elaine or final comments? We got work to do. That's good. Thank you for a great report. All right, moving on. Flipping over other matters. Provost Tabor pinch hitting for President Linton, who's in New York City for some event. I don't know what it is. But we have a request to approve granting of an honorary degree.
He is in the other Manhattan.
He is the Big Apple.
Yes, he is. And go Cats.
Go Cats, EMA, baby.
What he's missing out on is the opportunity to present to the board a spectacular candidate for an honorary degree. I'm really excited and honored to be presenting this to you. I'm asking for your support to present at the College of Veterinary Medicine commencement on May 12th, an honorary doctor of veterinary medicine to Dr. Temple Grandin. Dr. Grandin is frankly the best at what she does in the world. She is a world-renowned livestock expert in animal behavior and also one of the most important public spokespersons for autism. She herself was diagnosed as autistic early in life and was one of the first major personalities to come out publicly with that diagnosis and remove the stigma of autism by doing so. Dr. Grandin has had numerous connections to Kansas State University that we're very proud of. She was on our faculty until 2016. She has been a scientific consultant to the university. She's been a consultant in renovation of livestock areas in the veterinary medicine college. She has been a graduate committee member in our Department of Clinical Sciences. She also delivered a Landon lecture in 2016 at K-State. She's just given so generously to our university and to our students that we're just very proud of our connection to her. I'm not going to go through all of her credentials here, but in the package, you'll see that she has tremendous scientific and professional credentials. And she's also a very, very prominent public intellectual, as signified by the fact that she was recognized by Time magazine in 2010 as one of our country's 100 most influential heroes. I like that word. So I'm asking you today to support our conferring upon her an honorary degree of veterinary medicine.
Provost Tabor did a great job pinching in. Regent Lane.
I would love to support this request to approve the honorary degree. I had a chance to meet Dr. Grandin in 1984 when she came to the State Hospital in Parsons and was helping us learn how to treat humans humanely. She's a remarkable individual. So with that, I'd like to move this forward.
All right. I'll second. Any further discussion? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, thank you. And go Wildcats. Come on, let's beat Sparty. All right, next up, Chancellor Gerard. Act on request to name a facility. Did I say that wrong? Okay.
Today, ask your approval.
You turn your mic on. I think it's off. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you. The Murphin, and so I'll just repeat that. Approval to name our outdoor football practice facilities for the Murphin family with the name of the Murphin Family Practice Fields. And by K-Board policy, that does require your approval. Just a little background on that. Of course, the Murphin family is well known to most of us for a number of reasons, but hail from the Wichita area and have been incredibly loyal to our university for many, many years. Dave Murphin graduated from KU with his bachelor's in both engineering and business, and Janet with her degree in journalism. All three of their kids have graduated from KU and have served our university in so many ways. Dave, for example, has served on our School of Business Board of Advisors, and actually in 2012 was named School of Business Distinguished Alumnus. He's been a trustee on the KU Endowment, and Janet served on our National Board of the Alumni Association. of course, they've served the state more broadly with, as you all know, Dave Murphy was a regent from 2015 to 2019. I'm of course indebted to him because he hired me along with the rest of the board at that point in time. But really has served in so many ways. He's the past chair of the Kansas Chamber of Commerce, past president of the Kansas Independent Oil and Gas Association, a founding member of the Kansas Heart Hospital, served on the board of directors of Goodwill, and has been inducted into the Kansas Business Hall of Fame in 2016. And together, they've been great long-term supporters of both KU and KU athletics. They made a gift to us to really create our outdoor practice facilities quite some time ago. And have delayed coming to you with this request for a number of reasons. One was it was inappropriate when he was a regent. And another was they were uncomfortable when they still had kids at KU. So moving past that, really would like to take this opportunity to request to name the Murphin family practice fields, which will be demonstrated outside on our fields.
Regent Dicus.
So moved.
Moved.
Second.
Second by Regent Winter. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right.
Very much.
Thank you. I'd like to see Dave throw football in there as part of this thing. Yeah. All right, Matt Casey. Legislative, anything been going on across the street?
Yeah, a few things going on.
All right, let's
It's
go.
That time of year, things are getting kind of busy. But we are rapidly approaching the end. At least a few deadlines, some key deadlines. This Friday is the last day for the majority of the committee work to wrap up all their items for the rest of the session. The first adjournment is April 6th. And next week, we'll also see on March 29th, the last day for the non-exempt bills to pass the second chamber. So it's kind of the second turnaround date. So we only have about 2 more weeks until first adjournment. And at that time, they'll take a few weeks off and come back April 26th for veto session. So having said that, a little bit about the timeline, as you know, the budget has been a primary focus for the last couple of weeks as they've started to work on that. This session's been quite a bit different than last session. Revenue situation still looking very healthy, but the legislature's got a much keener focus on taxes this year. And they've been looking at a tax plan and trying to balance that with the revenues and the spending. So this year, they've been a little bit more cautious with the spending. They've been taking the governor's budget recommendation and deferring many items to omnibus. The Senate's really taken a path of including items in the budget, but then reviewing those items in omnibus. And the House has taken a little bit of a different path as they've just removed some items out of the budget. So everything's still in play. Nothing's been done. Nothing's been cut out permanently. But really what we're going to see next is a revenue situation taking shape once they get a better number on what the tax plan is going to look like. And then also the updated consensus revenue estimate in April. When they come back for veto session, they'll have a much better picture on where they stand and what kind of spending they're going to look at. So that's really the biggest focus right now. I also wanted to talk about just a couple non-budgetary bills. We are tracking over 49 bills, keeping tabs on where those are. A few of those bills right now are still moving through the process that we are focused on. HB 2290, the affiliation bill, Fort Hays State affiliation bill, is on Senate General Orders below the line. But once it goes above the line and gets worked by the Senate, and no further amendments to that bill, which there hasn't been, it will be sent to the governor for approval. So that's very exciting. And that bill has been moving through very, very smoothly. Another item, HB 2234, which would raise the cap for on-call services for engineering, architecture, and land surveying services. This bill is also in the Senate on general orders and waiting to come above the line to be worked as well. That bill was amended on the House side, but it was not amended on the Senate side. So if that goes through without any further amendments, it will also go to the governor's office. There's been a variety of other bills that have popped up that we've been tracking, we've been working on. It's been one of those sessions where there's just been something that's popped up and there's a hearing the next day, but a lot of those bills aren't moving. So it's been keeping us busy, but really it's boiling down to a couple bills that we're tracking that we're in favor of that are in the hopper that are moving forward. Last thing I wanted to mention, tomorrow, the Open Educational Resource Showcase in the Capitol, first floor of the Rotunda from 8:30 to 3 o'clock. This has been a real good, positive thing that our system's been working on to try to keep those costs down for textbooks for students. So after the Thursday activities here in the board office, if you have some time to walk over and take a look at that, and I think it'd be really good to check out what they've been working on. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions? Comments? Yes, Region Winner.
Status of the, excuse me, the status of the EBF bill.
Good question. Yes, Senate Bill 94 is what that started out as. That got moved then into Senate Bill 138, which was a Strother Field property tax bill. We've had quite a few conversations with tax committee members and leadership on that issue. And we've really stressed the importance of that funding, that stability of that funding in regards to how it relates to our capital renewal projects. So we've had those conversations. It's really been a positive interaction. And as of this moment, I think there's really no further movement on that issue. So we've had some good conversations on that. Anything's possible, but right now, at least it's looking optimistic.
Good work. Very good work. Yeah. Other questions? Good question. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
For that update. Now I'm gonna pitch it over to Region Ice to kick us into executive session, if you will.
So the preliminary said 45 minutes.
What time do we need to be out of here? 4:35, so we got 30 minutes.
That's what I start.
Okay.
Okay, so I move that the Board of Regents recess into executive session to discuss personal matters of non-elected personnel. The subject of this executive session is preparation for 2 CEO evaluations, and the purpose is to protect the privacy of the individual board employees involved. The session should last approximately 30 minutes and will conclude at 4:35 and shall include the following persons who are either members of the body who will aid in the discussion, members of the Kansas Board of Regents, President and CEO Blake Flanders for a portion of the executive session, John Yeary, General Counsel, and Julene Miller, Project Specialist. So the open meeting shall resume at 4:35.
All right, I second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye, all opposed? All right. So we'll move over to Kathy. You're up. Let's don't delay Regents since we're short on time. All in favor? Aye.
Meeting adjourned.